Hey everybody, thanks for watching. We're going to take a look at Luke chapter 12 in this video, and we're going to do three things. We're going to look at how Jesus, in his approach to the scriptures, is following a common interpretive device that was used by the rabbis of his day, known as kol v'chomer. We'll talk about that. And then we'll do a little bit of textual archaeology, in which we dig down below this text to see the Old Testament background to everything that Jesus is saying, because he's pulling from Psalms and Proverbs and Kings and all over the place to put these together in one encapsulated teaching. So there's a ton of Old Testament background to this particular story. And then thirdly, we're going to see how this particular text resonates with the story from 1 Kings, where Solomon, at the beginning of his reign, asked God for a lev shomeah, for a listening heart, and how that particular request is linked to the point that Jesus is getting across in Luke chapter 12. So let's dig right in. First of all, the rabbinic correspondence that Jesus has here in his approach to the scriptures. So there were a couple of famous rabbis in the first centuries known as Hillel and Shammai, and there were various interpretive devices or hermeneutical rules that were later formulated that were called the rules of Hillel and Shammai. And the very first of these, the one that is mentioned over and over, is known as kol v'chomer. It's basically an argument from lesser to greater. So if something lesser is true, then how much more true is something which is greater? This was applied in a lot of legal context. Now, the way that Jesus uses this particular approach in this story from Luke chapter 12 and this teaching from Luke chapter 12 is when he talks about the ravens, which neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? So if it's true that God takes care of the ravens, then it's much more true that he's going to take care of you. And he also applies in the case of the lilies. So if these lilies are beautifully arrayed by God, even more beautifully arrayed than Solomon was, but they're only here today and then they're gone tomorrow. Well, if God clothes these lilies, well, how much more true is it that he is going to also clothe you? So don't be anxious about what you're going to wear, or don't be anxious about what you're going to eat. So this particular approach that Jesus takes, in which he talks about something lesser, lilies and ravens, to compare that to something greater, you, humans, then this is the way that Jesus is using this kol v'chomer, this rabbinic interpretive device, this argument from lesser to greater, or in some context from greater to lesser. And this shouldn't be any surprise. Jesus was a rabbi. He was well acquainted with the rabbinic debates and discussions and interpretive approaches of his day. And so what Jesus does here corresponds very closely to what other rabbis were doing in his day and time. So secondly, what about the textual archaeology of this particular story in Luke chapter 12? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are all sorts of Old Testament parallels, background to what Jesus says here. And that's no surprise, because as I've mentioned repeatedly in these videos, when Jesus and the early apostles are teaching, are interpreting, they are constantly pulling from what was the Bible of Jesus' day, what we call the Old Testament. So Jesus is drawing from Psalms, he's drawing from Proverbs, he's drawing from Kings when he teaches his disciples and us. So for instance, in reference to the ravens, well, we got Job 38, and we have the Psalms as well, which talk about how God explicitly says how God provides for the ravens, which cry out to him. And of course, Jesus applies that here, that if God takes care of these ravens, which in the Old Testament, in the Levitical system, were unclean birds, if God takes care of these unclean birds in the Old Testament, if he feeds them, well, is he not going to feed you who are his people? Well, of course he is. Secondly, he talks about how the lilies of the field are beautifully arrayed, and yet they're only here today, and then tomorrow they're gone. Well, that fits actually with several different sections from the Psalms, and I'll put these in the notes, these particular biblical references. Psalm 90 is one instance where the impermanence of humanity, our fragility, the fact that our life is so fragile, is compared to the impermanence and fragility of the green herb, or to the grass, or to the flowers, which is here today and then gone tomorrow. So if God takes care of these things of creation, the grass, the lilies, even though they're so fragile and impermanent, he's going to take care of you as well. Then there's also the reference that Jesus makes to, as far as Old Testament references, to how he's going to give the kingdom to his little flock. Now, this is a highly significant text because what Jesus is alluding to is a very important section from Daniel chapter 7. Check that whole chapter out. It's a story of when the Son of Man appears before the Ancient of Days, and he takes his seat beside the Ancient of Days, and he's given the kingdom. But later in the chapter, in Daniel chapter 7, it also says this kingdom is given to the saints, to the holy ones, to those who are the followers of the Son of Man. Daniel 7 is an extremely important text because this is about the Messiah. It's about the anointed one, the Son of Man, who is given the kingdom by the Ancient of Days, by the Father. So when Jesus says he's given the kingdom to his little flock, don't fear, little flock, because it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, he is drawing from this section in Daniel chapter 7, in which the kingdom of God, the dominion, is given not only to the Son of Man, but also to those who are of the Son of Man, of the Messiah. So there's all sorts of Old Testament references and allusions in this particular story. Now, let me get to the third point, and that is actually one more Old Testament allusion, but we're going to look at that narrative. So Jesus mentions that not even Solomon in all his glory was clothed like one of these lilies, or the lilies of the field. So when Jesus mentions Solomon, it draws us back actually into the story of Solomon, into a particularly important story. This is early in the reign of Solomon. He's just taken the throne after the death of his father David, and he's young and he's inexperienced, and God appears to him and says, ask me what you want me to give to you, and I'll give it to you. And so Solomon, rather than asking for long life, or rather than asking for riches, rather than asking for the death of his enemies, he asked for what in Hebrew is called a lev shomeah, which is literally a listening heart, sometimes translated a discerning heart, or an understanding heart, in order that he might be able to judge between that which is good and that which is evil. And God says, okay, I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to give you a lev shomeah. I'm going to give you a listening heart, a heart with an ear that's tuned in to the voice of God. But God goes on to say, because you've asked for this lev shomeah, a listening heart, and not for riches, or not for long life, or not for the death of your enemies, well, then I'm going to give you all of these other things on top of that. I'm going to give you riches. I'm going to give you honor. I'm going to give you a reputation among the kings that's greater than any other king has had since then. Now, the way that this particular story about Solomon corresponds to the teaching of Jesus is that Jesus says that you are to seek first his kingdom, to seek to live under the reign of God in his anointed King, Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And when you seek that kingdom, then God is going to take care of all these other things as well. So you seek the kingdom, and God is going to clothe you. He's going to feed you. He's going to give you everything that you need, because, of course, God knows that you need all of these things. That is paralleled in exactly what happens with Solomon, because Solomon sought that which was most important. He was the king, and he sought to do God's will. He wanted a heart with an ear on it that was tuned into the word of God, this lev shomeah, a listening heart. And because Solomon sought that most important thing, because he sought that listening heart in order that he might be a just and a right king, then God said, I'm going to take care of everything else as well. I'm going to give you everything else that you need. In fact, I'm going to give you everything else in abundance. Now, Jesus says, in a little bit different way, seek his kingdom, and he's going to take care of all of these other things as well. It's a case of making sure that what our concern is, what we're seeking, is that which is most important. To seek the kingdom of God is to seek to live under the gracious reign of the Son of Man, who in Daniel 7 is given the power and the dominion and the glory. And as we seek to live in this kingdom, which it's our Father's good pleasure to give to us, then we seek to live underneath the one who has made us his children, who has promised to take care of us who are members of his little flock. So we also like Solomon does, ask for a lev shomea, a listening heart, in order that as we live under this kingdom, within this kingdom of the Messiah, our ears, our hearts are tuned in to what he would have us to do and what he would have us to believe, in order that we might live within his little flock who is cared for by our good and our gracious Father. So that's a few reflections on Luke chapter 12. You have the rabbinic device called the Kal Vachomer. You have all sorts of Old Testament allusions, and I'm going to put these in the notes underneath the video in case you want to reference those. And you have this connection to Solomon's request for a lev shomea, connected with our seeking first the kingdom of God and living within this kingdom of our King, the Messiah. Thanks for watching, and may God bless your meditations, and may God bless your reception of the word this Sunday from Luke chapter 12. Have a great day.